Okay then, so now we've loaded in the Vue library right here and we're linking to our own app.js file, and this is where we're going to write all of our Vue code. But how exactly do we do that? Well, we start off by creating what's known as a Vue App, and it's the job of that Vue App to control either the full website or just a certain part of a web page. Now in our case, it's going to control just a certain part of the web page. But first of all, how do we create this Vue App? Well, when we load it in this Vue library, we get access to a Vue object, and on that Vue object there is a method called createApp, and that's what we use to create a Vue app. I'm going to store the result of this in a constant called app, but you can call this constant what you want, and I'm going to set it equal to Vue, which we get access to because we load in the Vue library, and then use the method createApp, and this creates a Vue app for us. So now we have that, but how do we tell this app right here that we want it to control a certain part of the web page? Well, on this app now we get access to a method called mount, and that method tells the app at what point or where in the DOM to mount this application. So I could say app.mount, for example, and pass in some kind of selector like #app, and that would tell Vue to take our app instance that we have right here and mount it in the DOM where we have some kind of element with the ID of app. Now for this to work, we need an element with the ID of app, so let's create that. I'm going to say div and then #app, press tab to create this, and now we have a div with the ID of app. So over here we're saying create the app and then mount that to this element in the DOM, and then now our Vue app controls anything inside this div. Anything outside of it doesn't control, so not here for example, but anything inside the div it would control. I hope that makes sense. So this is the part of the web page now that we're controlling with Vue. But what does this mean? Well, it means that any kind of dynamic data that we want to output inside this app element, or any events or interactivity which occur inside it, like click events or mouse move events, all of that will now be controlled by our Vue app. For example, if the user clicked on something inside this element, inside here, like a button or something else, then we could react to that inside our Vue app. We could set up a function to handle that click event. Or if we have some data like a list of book titles, we could use our Vue app to make that data accessible inside this element so we could output it to the browser. Now the way we do all this is by first passing in an object into the createApp method. Now this object represents something called a root component in Vue. It's basically the component that will be controlling the app section, this section right here, of the web page. And inside it we can set up any data or functions to react to events that we want. Another thing that we can specify inside this is the component template. That is the template that will be rendered inside the app element. So the way we do that is by coming up inside this object and creating a template property, which will be a string. And this string is just going to be some HTML. So for example, an H2, I am the template, close off the H2, and that's it. That is our template now for this component. And what we're saying here is that we want inside this app, inside this div right here, this to be the template that's output. So now Vue is going to mount the DOM at this location. It's going to take our template and inject that into this element inside it. So if we preview now in the browser, we can see I am the template, and I'm going to inspect that to see the HTML, and you'll notice this is the template that we created inside the component. All right, so it's just output inside this div right here with the ID of app. And also notice we have this extra attribute called data-v-app. That just denotes that this is the Vue app. This is where it's mounting the DOM. Okay, cool. Now, sometimes if you have a more complex template with several lines of HTML, it's not always appropriate to create that template right here because this could get very messy. So instead what we could do, and what I'm going to do going forward, is just create the template directly inside the app right here. So for example, I could say H2 and then tab and say I am the template now and save it. And now this will be the template of this component right here. Now it looks as though we're just making normal HTML, and we are, but what we can do inside this template is actually output dynamic data. And if I save it now, first of all, we'll see that template. But later on, if I try to output something dynamic that we define over here as some data inside our component, we can. So that's what makes it different than normal HTML. And we couldn't do that if we didn't use Vue. So we'll take a look at that and how to do that with data in the next lesson.